And she is on her way. Got held up at another meeting, but she'll be here in just shortly. So we'd like to welcome everybody here for the Boundary Commission meeting. And this is number 2 of hopefully 2 on this issue. So we'll, first of all, we'd like to, if we could, have a motion to approve the agenda. And then we'll go after that, a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda for this meeting.
Is there a second? I'll second. Moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. How about the minutes from the last time? Everyone read those? Motion to approve, anybody? Pretty easy.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded. Out loud? Yes, okay. Just so that it's on record that you said out loud, because sometimes the visual isn't there. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
I will abstain, having not been here.
We have one abstention then from the minutes. That's fine. Okay. Dion, did you want to abstain from the last minutes too? You're okay. Okay. We'll now go ahead and have the public hearing. And considering the formal protest by Nibley City against the proposed annexation filed with Logan City by Mark Daines on behalf of Paul Ray, Leanne Campbell, and DRC Legacy Holdings, LLC. At this point, we have some new commissioners, boundary commissioners that are here. We'll go ahead and again have a short presentation. Last time we had Nibley go first, so if it's okay, does anyone object that we have Logan go first? Is that okay?
Usually it's a moving party.
You know, it really is, isn't it? It really is. Yes. So that is, we don't want to change the precedence on that. So then we'll have Nibley City go first, and because that is true. And if we can, on the discussion that we have, try to keep your case in point to the items that are pertinent, and try to keep some of the emotional things out of it. Let's get right to the brass tacks of things, and so that we can move on. So Nibley, whoever's representing Nibley. Mayor Dustin? How much time do you think you'd want?
I have no idea. Depends on questions, but it should be pretty quick.
Okay. I just got piped to move at 5.
All right. We will help you with that.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Plug into it.
Do you want to plug in here?
Yep.
None of those.
The magic. Yeah. Okay. It's going to be this one. We took your advice to heart in the last meeting, and we'd just like to focus on the facts today. Nobody's going to be impacted by this. There's no way around that. So we just want to go back through and tell you what our basis is for our objection, and start with a little bit of background. In 2005, Nibley annexed a piece of property for the Peterson Farm Store. It was adjacent to an industrial park out on the highway. At that time, Nibley was the only municipality with utilities close enough to service that. Logan was 3/4 of a mile up the road. It was across the street from our industrial park, so we annexed it. The response was swift and sure, and Year and a half later, Logan responded by annexing a 1.5 mile peninsula that went down Highway 89 and exists to this day and continues to cause issues between the two cities. At the time, there was no consultation or discussion, but Nibley didn't protest it because we figured that those property owners had that right. In 2017 and 2020, Logan annexed and rezoned 80 acres north of Nibley. Again, there was no consultation or discussion. Again, Nibley didn't protest. Our reason for not protesting was there was sufficient open land remaining for Logan to handle its own business and to take care of the social services and community services that would normally be required for a development like this. Because essentially what's happening is another small city is being built on the north side of 2200 South. In 2020, Nelson Farms de-annexed from Logan and into Nibley because there were no services and they wanted to develop. There was also a failure to follow code in the original annexation, in the creation of the peninsula, and also in the failure to plan for or provide services for that peninsula. Now in 2021, we're talking about the annexation and rezone for the subject parcel. This is the last opportunity that we have to mitigate the impact on Nibley of Logan's decisions to put high-density residential across the street from our existing open space and parks. The impact of that is going to be, by our estimation, somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000 new people across the street from a park that services about 1,000 Nibley residents within a quarter mile. Whoops. The proposal again fails to follow Logan's own code. The impact on us is what has forced this protest. And if Logan will follow the code, we feel like the impact can be resolved. And we'll get into that. But we feel like denial is the only remaining avenue. We've tried to get to the table, but we can't get anybody to explain to us what exactly is proposed, what the development is going to be, what might be some mitigation that can be provided. All we have is Logan's MR20 zone, because once this is approved, then the developer is allowed to put in anything that's allowed under that MR20 zone. And frankly, one of our concerns is that because we protested it, there will be very little consideration for mitigation in Nibley at that point. So denial is our only remaining avenue for mitigation. So our objectives today are to show that the proposed annexation does not comply with state code. It doesn't comply with the City of Logan's own code in their general plan and annexation and policy plans, and it negatively affects Nibley City. We also hope to show that, or we like to review the remedies available through the Boundary Commission, what you guys can do. And our goal is disapproval of the petition because we feel like that's the appropriate action at this time. If that denial, we hope, will give us the space that we need to negotiate with Logan City. You know that our request is not about whether or not this goes into 20 units per acre. What it's about, and it's real. We're not trying to beat up on the people that have proposed the annexation. What we're trying to do is we're trying to protect the property rights of the thousands of people that have contributed to the development of that space and that own the space next to it. And this commission is the only venue that we have to do that, and it's the appropriate venue for that. So what is the law? What is the role of the Boundary Commission? We talked about this extensively last time, that you've got several options, ranging from approving the annexation to denying the annexation and lots of things in between. That's difficult because the state doesn't give us a whole lot of guidance on what exactly in between means. So it's our intent to focus on really those two binary options, approval or denial. In considering protest, the Commission shall consider whether the proposed annexation complies with the requirements of sections 10.2.402 and 10.2.403 and the annexation policy plan of the proposed annexing municipality. If it doesn't comply with the annexation policy plan of the proposed annexing municipality, then that's a problem. If it conflicts with the annexation policy plan of another municipality, also a problem. We hope to show that both of those things are happening here today. And then the adverse tax consequence is the third option, but we don't need to spend time on that. So there's not much further guidance given. If we were a larger county, then the state is explicit about what can be considered. And even though that's not really, it's not something that you have to consider, I think that it's useful guidance and it's worth going through. Because I know that when we were here last time, none of us were really sure what the remedies were and what we could do and where we could go with it. But if we look at what a county of the first class looks at, and I couldn't tell you, I'd be very curious to know why that's in code for the larger counties, but it's not provided as guidance for us. We don't understand that. But here's what it tells us. One, if a protest was filed by a municipality with boundaries within half a mile of the area proposed for annexation, look at the current population density of the surrounding area, look at the proposed population density, create or leave an unincorporated island or peninsula, fiscal impact of the proposed annexation on not just the unincorporated area, but also other municipalities, the history, cultural, and social aspects of the area proposed for annexation in the surrounding area, past expansion in the area, the method of providing and the entity that has provided municipal services in the past to the proposed area, the willingness of the other municipality to annex the area proposed for annexation, and the effect on each school district in the proposed annexation area. All of these things that are highlighted have bearing on this discussion. And none of them, I don't think, have been resolved. These are all things that should be discussed between the cities, and we should be able to come to resolution on them. One of the other things that came up last time was really zoning property, and there was a lot of emphasis on property rights. A rezone is not a property right. I don't get to go to my city and say, I want to put a hog slaughtering plant next to your wedding chapel. I don't get to do that. Just because you own the property doesn't mean you get to do anything you want with it. What it means is that you can ask. And if those uses are compatible with existing uses, then the rezone is appropriate. Cities deny rezones all the time. We listen to the property owners, we respect them, but we listen to all of the property owners. We listen to all of the impacted property owners. There's a reason why when we do a rezone in a city that a letter goes out to everybody within a radius of that property. And that's so that they can weigh in and come to the body that's making that decision and say, hey, this is going to impact me. This is going to hurt me. I've been invested in this property for 20 years, 40 years, 100 years. I've been here. My family's been here. This is ours, and we have an expectation that it will continue to be useful in the capacity that we've been using it for as long as we've had it. And it's not the city's job to come in and say, you know what, we're going to take all of that history and we're going to put it in the dustbin because this new property owner wants to do something different, and it doesn't matter if it impacts you. It doesn't matter. Both property owners in a rezone have those rights. So to say that Nibley is trying to deny a property right, no, we're not. That right has to be compatible. It has to be compatible with the adjoining properties. And the problem that we have here is we have two cities that have not communicated, that are butted up against each other, that have very different ideas for how this property was going to develop over time. And what we've run into now is one of those cities wants to essentially build out the space that's available with a very dense development that will have a negative impact on what the other city has been planning on and what the property owners in the other city have been investing in for as long as they've been there. So this is a reasonable question for us to consider. And the property rights that need to be considered are not just the property rights of the people that brought in the petition. The property rights that need to be considered and that have to frankly be considered by this commission are the property rights of those on both sides of that city boundary, because there's not a mechanism in place between the cities to be able to resolve this. This is a conversation that should have happened months ago. We invited Logan to have that conversation. They declined the opportunity. A denial today would put us in a position where we need to have that conversation again. And that's really what we're asking for. We want to have that conversation. To the countywide, as far as zoning, well, I think I've covered it. Yeah, that's good enough. I want to be respectful of the time. So to the point about whether Logan has followed their own code in doing this, which is one of the requirements and one of the things that has to be considered by this committee. Logan is a city, this is a quote from Logan's code. Logan is a city of neighborhoods, and newly annexed areas are to be developed to naturally mesh with established neighborhoods. It doesn't say just established Logan neighborhoods, it says established neighborhoods. As with existing neighborhoods, most new neighborhoods have their own unique qualities, residents, and environment. The city will manage development of neighborhoods to preserve these qualities. The proposed rezone and annexation continues a policy that fails to meet those objectives. Also from Logan's general plan, the city of Logan will work with adjoining communities to define mutually acceptable and logical urban service boundaries between communities to ensure that areas annexed may be served efficiently and effectively. Now, most of the time when we talk about this, we're talking about roads and sewers, pipes, electricity, stuff like that. I would argue that another service that cities provide is parks. And Logan's closest park, we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but Logan's closest park is 3/4 of a mile away. Our closest park is across the street. There's been no discussion. There's been limited discussion about Logan taking over a park that I proposed that my council was not in favor of. But as far as how we manage these things and operate and maintain them in the future, that's a conversation that Nibley had to propose, and it's not going anywhere right now. So, also from Logan City's general plan, agriculture and open space preservation, especially on the community's periphery, are important community pursuits. Community separation has been a historic tradition in Cache Valley. This separation has great value and results in a conscious management of peripheral agricultural and open space. You could argue that that's exactly what's happening here. You could also argue that it's happening because Nibley, independently and alone, has paid for it. And it's not right for one city to create a burden on another city. And I would argue that that's in violation of, again, Logan's general plan. So to sum up, Logan's annexation plan states that they will follow Utah law. Previous annexation created an island. There was also a previous annexation that created a peninsula. The proposed annexation will make the island worse. Logan's annexation plan says it'll work with adjoining communities to define mutually acceptable and logical urban service boundaries. Logan has failed to reach out to or effectively respond to Nibley's proposals. Logan's annexation plan emphasizes the value of farmland and open space. Proposed annexation forces Nibley to pay for Logan's open space. Logan's annexation plan, newly annexed areas are to be developed to naturally mesh with established neighborhoods. The proposed annexation ignores long-established neighborhoods that were in place before Logan annexed any of these three parcels that we're talking about today. Last but not least, Logan's annexation plan is to provide capacity for services. When we talk about parks, when we talk about open space, Logan has failed to do that too. So, what are the impacts to Nibley? We currently own and operate 40 acres of parks that are within that quarter-mile radius. Those represent a $10 million investment on the part of Nibley City. We also cover all of the ongoing maintenance for that. When we start adding all those people, those parks are going to be impacted. And there is nothing in any of these proposals that helps us with that, other than what I have offered as an individual. Two, Logan has no current plans to enhance recreation or parks south of 8991 or west of SR 252. Logan will make the argument that they invite everyone to their parks, but we all pay sales taxes in Logan, and so we all help to fund those. It doesn't go both ways, except for the sales tax that we might pick up at Maverick from people visiting Nibley. The annexation pushes the development of non-taxable services into Nibley precisely because it occupies all of the available space. Where else is left for the school district to put a school? Where else is left for there to be a park? Where else is there open space to be able to put in a church? By building this out in this manner, it forces that development outside of this area, and it forces us to subsidize that development in Logan. It's not fair. That's why this commission is here, to look at those impacts on other cities. This is all resolvable if we would have been able to have those discussions and if that code would have been followed in the first place. There was a question that was raised last time about property tax and whether property tax and whether development pays for itself. For those of us that are in small cities, we know that property tax is the tax. Basically two things, property tax and it really comes down to property tax and our share of the sales tax. And bigger, denser development pays for itself a heck of a lot more efficiently than half-acre lots. And that's precisely why Nibley has been pushing more and more towards denser development, because we want to cover our own bills. We want to be able to pay for things that we incur. We just figure out how to make it do, how to make it work with what we have, because we don't have the sales tax base. We don't have Home Depot. We don't have Sam's Club. We don't have any of that stuff. So we don't get this direct sales tax revenue. We make it work with property tax. So it's kind of a red herring to say that property tax is not important to a small city, because it is. Another question came up about Nibley's level of service for utilities, et cetera. It's our belief that the county provides outstanding service to 37% of the county area. We look to the county sheriff for our law enforcement. They do a great job. We really, really like working with the county sheriff. We also have the recently constructed South Ambulance Service that we have a lot of confidence in and we're excited about. Hiram Fire has a mutual aid agreement with Logan City, so that's pretty much a wash. The sewer collection system has capacity. Our water system has the capacity. We are willing to annex, and we've shown that we can make stuff work. So I really feel like the level of service argument, if the outcome were to come into Nibley, is really a wash. So this is the last slide. What's our request? I'll hit it again. Approve the de-annexation petition. Make us all come to the table and talk to each other. We can work this out. The provisions are there in Logan's own code for us to work this out. But those provisions have to be activated. Somebody has to sit down and have a conversation. And yeah, you guys have the authority. You have the responsibility. You're the venue that we come to resolve this. And I'm sorry that that's the case. I know this is a hard job. I wish you got to ride in parades and stuff, because that's like usually the high side of doing this kind of public service. But it's a hard job that you've been asked to do. You have to resolve a fundamentally difficult conflict between two parties that have been trying to figure it out and can't seem to do it. But I don't see any other way to get us all to the table than denying the rezone petition. Or sorry, denying the annexation petition. Appreciate your time. If you have any questions for me, be happy to answer them as best I can. And that's all I've got for today. So thank you.
Mayor, would you please go back to your map for me?
Sure.
Thank you. We got right up to the 2020. Can you I think you've got the little red
shoot. Yep.
pokey. Where is, and I've looked at it on maps and I've actually driven this area. However, from this map and view, I don't know exactly where your
Sorry.
this proposed annexation is. I would like to see that.
I know how to do this, but we'll have to dive out of the presentation. So,
Just right east of that blue island on the northeast.
yeah, so here's my cursor right
There you
here.
go, yeah, if you can,
And Mayor, you could go to the bottom right-hand corner and increase the magnification.
Oh, that's right.
this'll work, if you can just point it out, I just need to,
Yeah,
See
so
it
it's
on this map.
right there.
thank you,
Yeah.
thank you.
So the last two annexations that both went in at MR20 are these two right here. The proposed annexation area is right here, and the park space that we're talking about is right here.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Dion.
You stated that Logan did not follow ordinances. What ordinances did they not follow?
So the general plan is adopted as,
Okay, let me stop there. General plan, my understanding, is not an ordinance, it's a suggestion.
but it's adopted by ordinance.
It's what?
It's adopted by ordinance.
Okay.
So you're right, but it's still adopted by ordinance, and it's still a statement of values and of direction for the community. And so that's our point, is that if they say that this is how they're going to deal with things, why is it not how they've been dealing with things? And then the others would be the creation of the island that happened in the 2020 annexation, and then also the creation of the peninsula. So there's a pattern of not following the ordinance and of not following the plan and not following the annexation plan, and all we're asking for is follow the plan. You know, do what you say you're gonna do.
Yeah. As a city council person, we don't always follow our general plan. We sometimes will adjust and say, that's not. So I have a little bit of a problem saying that that's an ordinance, but,
And I can appreciate that. I think different cities approach it different ways. The way that we approach it is we don't make exceptions to the general plan. If we come up to something, we change, if we say we're not gonna do it this way, we change the plan. And then we proceed. But I can appreciate that.
Mayor, I think it's a good point that was brought up is, what are the points? And I don't know if we, for example, we bring up the peninsula, is the wording generally? I don't know the legal wording on that. And so if the word is generally or should or cannot or probably shouldn't, wording matters. And so we don't know, what is the wording on that for the state?
Right. It's my understanding that unless it's approved by the county,
Yeah.
then it's not something that should be done.
I think we.
Yeah, I think asking an attorney, ask an attorney before you ask me, yeah.
I mean, to say they should not do this is against state code, we're like, well, they're against city code. But how do we know that? Otherwise we have to just trust you. There has to be, the language has to be out on the table for us to make any rational decision to say, well, he said it's against city code, so we're gonna deny it. That wouldn't be responsible for us.
Understood.
Nor would it be responsible for you as a mayor to say, here's the 3 reasons why they're in violation, and say, well, I think we need to have that as a discussion. What are the violations? And use the actual words. Otherwise, we're just voting just off an emotional mayor that wants us to say no to it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
No,
I think we defer to council and say, tell us about the peninsula. Is it say should not, could not, never can? The one about the other one is about the island. That's something that was done how long ago?
well, and I would say, yeah, let me,
That's not really that's
Yeah.
not a decision. That can't really be put in that
let me
argument.
clarify. Those are in there primarily to show that there's a pattern.
Sure.
So neither of those is directly applicable to this
Yes, right.
annexation.
So let's go to the third one. The third one was, what was the third one?
So,
We had 3 points. One was peninsula, one was island, which both of those two are tough sells, I think. It's like,
right,
So what's the third? You had a third.
sure.
And
So here's the summary. The Logan annexation plan states that they'll follow state Utah law, but there's been a history of not necessarily doing that.
But
That's-
that can't be taken in consideration for whether they.
Oh, no, the reason is, the reason that that's in there is because I wanted you guys to understand that this is something that's been going on for a long time, and we've held back and held back and held back and held back until finally it got to the point where we had to protest something. But as far as the others go, the annexation plan says it will work with communities, adjoining communities to define mutually acceptable and logical service boundaries. Failed to reach out to us.
So you're saying the third one is there was no communication, no meeting, no collaboration, no, I don't know what legally they have to do, John. What is the legal requirement to follow city code to say we have done sufficient due diligence and enough to say, yes, we can now proceed? I don't know what that is. I mean,
Tells them that it
Do you want-
complies and that it follows their annexation plan.
I gave some guidance at the last meeting and left, and let you know that I wanted to do a little more research on.
Oh, you
on
got
your
it,
discretion,
yeah.
and I have that to give you and can answer that question at the same
That
time.
at our,
but I think-
we'll do that at our
I may be
discussion item.
jumping in. Mayor,
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
appreciate
so-
your points. I mean, this is the nuts and bolts of it. And
So the reference in state code for the first question is UCA 10-2-415-8,
yeah.
and that's the one that requires the city to follow their own annexation policy plan.
So the question is, they should, they have to, they have no other option, they probably should. What is the language, the legal language there?
In considering protest, the commission shall consider whether the proposed annexation complies with the requirements of section 10-2-402 and 10-2-403 and the annexation policy plan of the proposed annexing municipality.
There's-
That's straight out of state code.
And what is, and the language was should,
Shall,
shall?
I got timed out.
It's also on these slides up here. I think it's one of these.
And again,
I'll go through that.
yeah, he'll go through it. And again, I don't know how much, 10 meetings, 2 meetings, 1 meeting, a phone call, a text, an email. At what point do you say that's reasonable? I don't know. At what point do you say?
I would say somewhere
reasonable.
north of 0.
Okay,
that-
and there was 0.
We reached out to them, they did not reach out to us.
So, again, I think there's always two sides. I don't know. We'd have to hear the other side to say, is that true? And they'd say, no, it's not true. Now we're in a mess saying, well,
Right.
now what do we do? They say they wanted to, they say, yeah.
Well, there should be, if they reached out to us, there should be documentation of that.
And that's-
And
yeah,
in the
well said.
packet, I have provided documentation of our reaching out to them. So there have been responses to our reaching out to them, but it's not our annexation policy plan that says we should work with other cities. It's Logan's annexation policy plan that says we should work with other cities. So if they've done it, then they can provide the documentation and we should be fine.
And is it legal to say, you know what, we don't want to meet, it is against our city plan, but we don't really want to meet, we move forward? Is that within legal, a legal area to go? I mean, can that be done, John? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah,
Personally,
I can't answer that either.
Study the law.
But what we're asking for is, we're asking for an opportunity to have those discussions. And that's the thing, is that we feel like the denial would create the space that would allow us to have those discussions.
One other thought, and I like it. I think that's a reasonable request, actually. My question is, let's just say it is denied. What confidence do you have that there will be a cordial, beautiful sit down where there's discussion and we're like, great, I love it, let's do it. We both feel good about it. Explain how that would even happen and why you have that hope.
We are willing to set everything aside and just sit down and have that conversation. I mean, at the end of the day, we know that we're on the bottom of the pile here.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why we're here. But we want the opportunity.
Right.
We want the chance to have the discussion.
And a denial would force that discussion?
Not necessarily, but an approval would eliminate the possibility.
Yeah, Logan would still have to say, fine, we'll sit down, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I get
yep,
it.
yep.
Okay. Other questions that you might have, Mayor Dustin? Anybody?
Hey,
Okay.
thanks you,
We'll
everyone.
reserve the rest of them for a little later in our discussion, so thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Mr. Housley, are you? That's a big, thick book you brought for us.
Yeah, well, I actually was not even going to speak initially. I was going to have the property owners and maybe just wrap up. But I think I have to address some of the things that were discussed. And, I mean, honestly, I'm shocked with some of the statements that were made. I mean, I don't know how you describe meeting, but I personally and Mike Desmoni had lunch for 2 hours with Mayor Dustin, try to work this out. In fact, I do have documentation because I have a copy of a parking ticket he got because we were at lunch too long, and I took care of it for him. So if that counts as documentation, I have that.
Now, that's on the record?
And it was, the whole purpose of that was to try to reach a resolution on this. We later, with the mayor, met with Sean Dustin on Firefly Park, and that was about an hour-and-a-half meeting where he made some
Okay,
I
Mayor Dustin,
appreciate, we gave you your turn, I'd just like to, so we met there for at least an hour and a half, trying to work out some resolution, and we actually, after that, we took it back, discussed it with council members one-on-one, and we agreed to take over the operation and maintenance of Firefly Park if they were agreeable to that. My understanding is the council wasn't supportive of doing that, but we have tried to work out some resolution. And I think the commission's caught on to this. It's great to throw out code violation, but he didn't cite one single code. General plan is aspirational, and even within the general plan, the language he claims that we're violating, it's a matter of perspective. Providing quality housing to promote, I think that does promote the public interest. I think it is a benefit to the greater community. And our general plan talks about and not looking at special interests or groups within a community. Sure, I am sensitive to the fact that there are neighbors who don't want to have the multi-housing that close to their development. But I'm not sure what Nibley's actually proposing. In one breath, they're saying we'll put the exact same thing where the annex property is. And then they're saying they want to stop it. It's not in compliance with our general plan. So I'm not sure what their position is. Let me just give you a little bit of history, though. It's really disappointing to hear that we don't follow the statutes, that we have a history of it, of not complying with what we say we're going to do. So in 1999, we started negotiations with Nibley to provide a sewer system for them. They were on septic tanks. They wanted to go to our treatment system. So their mayor, Jay Nelson, in February 3rd of 2000, signed an agreement where we would provide them sewer treatment. In exchange, they agreed that they would not annex north of 2600 South. That was in our sewer agreement. Not more than 2 years later, they annexed south of 2600 and across north, and across Highway 89. And what it said is they would not annex any portion of those lands identified as being within the Master Annexation Policy Declaration of Logan City. That policy declaration was dated in 1996. I know in our last meeting I said this has been in since at least 2002. We did a little more digging. All of this has been in our policy annexation plan since at least 1996. We could at least go back that far. So they violated it within 2 years. We sent them a letter telling them that they had violated it. It's on this page right here. We had the option to just terminate the agreement, but we knew that wasn't realistic. They'd already started having their sewer treated by the city. We couldn't just, tap off the pipe and let them drown in their own sewer. So we didn't exercise that provision. But what we did do is we required them to pay for the sewer line that we put in 2200 South. They paid us about $155,000, and they agreed that the annexation line would be 2200 South, that they would not go north of 2200 South. I have that in a letter from Nibley, who at the time it was Mayor Gerald Knight, and just from that letter, he says, and I won't read, and this is part of the protest that Nibley filed in 2007. Mayor Dustin represented that they didn't file a protest. They absolutely did. I represented the city in that one, and this commission can look at their own records. That was another knockdown, drag-out hearing. Nibley did protest in 2007. But in that letter to Logan, again from Mayor Knight, is it Knight or Knight? Yeah, Knight. Logan has a history of working with Nibley in a cooperative manner. I am gratified with former Logan Mayor Doug Thompson and Logan Community Development Director Jay Nelson and their willingness to cooperate with Nibley in setting the line at 2200 South. That's what they agreed to contractually. And now they're accusing Logan of not being fair, of having a history of not keeping our word. I mean, it's incredulous. So, they honored it until 2018 when they decided to change their annexation plan to include this property north of 2200 South. At that time, Mike Desimone filed a protest to just their policy plan or a policy declaration. And I don't recall, was that an actual annexation or was it just their plan?
Just a response to their plan.
Just a response to their plan. So to this point, they have not violated that agreement. They violated their earlier ones, but they haven't violated that one. But that's what they're attempting to do here. Now, the only piece, everything so far along the common boundaries gone into Logan. Yes, we did have the one in 2017 and the one in 2020. All of it complied with the law. I mean, it's easy to say you're in violation, but where is it in violation? It's just an argument that he's throwing out there with no support for it. The one in 2007 came to this boundary commission. They looked at it. If it was in violation of the law, they would have denied it then. So I think it's important to make this decision based on the law that's before you, not based on emotional arguments, accusations that Logan doesn't keep their word. There's a reason why there's been a reluctance to negotiate with Nibley, because we have not had a good experience, this being a good indication. And I'm not trying to impugn any individual, but as an entity, we have not had good dealings with Nibley. You know, there's different mayors, different councils that come along. And again, I do not want to make this personal, but the suggestion that Logan has done something nefarious is just not fair. We've honored our agreement. We haven't been able to get Nibley to honor theirs. All we're saying is it's within our annexation plan. The property owners want to come in. It meets the code. I'm not sure what else needs to be discussed. But with that, I want to turn it over to the property owners, because I do think it's more about them than it is about Logan.
Is it okay if he passes?
Oh, yeah, yeah, you bet. They're COVID-free. Is the same thing going to be put up on the?
Yes.
So that the, you know, out there in the
That's what
audience?
he's trying to set up now.
Thank you.
This is just a copy of our presentation.
While he's setting up, just if there are any questions regarding our master plan, Mike Desimone, our community development director, can address those. He's got some maps. So we don't want to take more time than is necessary, but if there are questions, we can show you exactly the language of our plan, and we have maps to support it. So
Thank you. there any questions of that while we're waiting? Okay.
Let me just, while we're having a gap here, I'm Gary Anderson, I represent the property owner. They are the applicant, and that's why we're going to focus on that, because we're a pawn in this situation. And that's what our presentation will be about, so that you get an understanding of the impact on the property owner. And one of the things that we'll point out is that Nibley City's principles include respect of private property rights. We about there?
Yep, except for,
Okay.
showing up on the screen.
That is a good picture.
Well, you know, can't blame me.
Where's that at?
Wellsville, actually Mendon.
Yeah, I thought so. That's my backyard.
Except for,
Mendon.
there we go.
Trying to influence the mayor.
Eyes those trees.
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah.
All right. All right, here's a table of contents. Can everyone hear me okay?
Can you please state your name?
Yeah, Nate Leishman.
Thank you.
Leishman, gotta get that right. Just overview, thank you all for being here. Really appreciate the time, and I know this is kind of taking a lot longer than we wanted to get here, but appreciate you all being here. Thank you. Overview, table of contents, just want to kind of talk about it. Got a site map. We're going to go over property owner rights, kind of the annexation code. We've kind of touched on that a little bit today. And then, we're going to go over a little bit about Nibley City and how they haven't been prepared, a little bit about their protest, and then finally conclusion. And so if we can, you've got all your packets, you can kind of go over this. It'll be a little more clear, but you can kind of see the site map, and hopefully that gives you a little bit of clarity. We can kind of read through this. I actually didn't bring my glasses, so I'm having a hard time reading. I can't see it on my screen because I had to roll it over. So, but is there a packet I can snag? So, I think the focus today, like Gary had mentioned, is that this is kind of about property owners' rights. And, initially, Mark, when he'll step up here and talk for just a moment shortly, but both, when we were originally doing the due diligence, both properties were considered, or both municipalities were considered when we were looking at purchasing the property. And there were a lot of elements that were considered. And Logan City had all the requirements that were met in terms of zoning, existing infrastructures, and utilities. All the services were available and a very clear track record to back it up. And Nibley City did not. So again, all the due diligence prior to acquiring the property was conducted, like any of us would do when acquiring any property. We closed with confidence and were very surprised to find out that Nibley City had filed a protest challenging us, the owners' property rights, to choose where to annex, and they were literally holding us hostage for financial gain. So, Gary's up. Watch the cord there.
Once you run the machine. Yeah, go ahead. The reason I got involved is, as Mr. Lowe indicated, there are some legal issues here. And if I've counted correctly, we've got 4 attorneys here, so you'll get a pretty good perspective on that in terms of how to interpret this. But what you're looking at here is that this annexation petition was filed pursuant to Utah Code 10-2403, and basically the requirements were met for annexation, and because this is not going to be, this does not involve any kind of a vote or a, public election. It's really between, under the code, typically it just gets filed the way it has been here, and only if a protest comes up does this boundary commission get involved. That's your fun job when there's a conflict here. Now, the next thing that we've talked about, the mayor of Nibley did talk about, was this Utah Code 10-401.5, and that's an annexation policy plan. And in developing, considering, and adopting an annexation policy plan, the Planning Commission and municipal legislative body shall attempt to avoid gaps between or overlaps with the expansion areas of other municipalities. Now, we've already made, it's been made clear that this parcel, this particular property that my clients own, was in Logan City's annexation plan as far back as 1996. When does Nibley arrive on the scene? 2018. And in 2018, these 2 parcels, it's one big parcel, 2 parcel numbers, ends up, it's on the north side of 2200, and it's the only, and it's an overlap with Logan City. Again, to think of the history, it's north of 2200, and it's these particular parcels that are identified by parcel number in Nibley's annexation plan. Clearly an overlap. Next, 10-2402 says, a municipality may not annex an incorporated area in a specified county for the sole purpose of acquiring municipal revenue or to retard the capacity of another municipality to annex the same or related area unless the municipality has the ability and intent to benefit the annexed area by providing municipal services to the annexed area. That'll become critically important here as we look about, see what happened after our clients did their due diligence. Now, I'm going to quote from Nibley City's own annexation plan adopted in 2018. Nibley's core values include the rural character, scenic beauty, and natural resources of the area, agricultural fields and open spaces, recognizing and respecting private property rights. The mayor stood here and said, from last time it turned out to be an issue about private property rights. Well, it's very appropriate, and it's in fact stated explicitly in Nibley City's own annexation plan. So that's why it's here, okay? The other thing that's interesting is that if we're talking about multifamily dwellings, it sounds to me like Nibley, in its own annexation plan, says they want to preserve agricultural fields and open spaces and the rural character, scenic beauty, and natural resource of the area, And that's probably why they didn't adopt any kind of multifamily ordinance until April 15th of this year, after this application was filed. Next, municipal services and taxes, and I'm quoting again from Nibley City's own annexation plan. Because they have to, under the ordinance, under the code, they have to say how we're going to pay for it and who's going to be responsible for the taxes. So let's see what Nibley says, the city says about that. Planned and other expansion of municipal services will be financed primarily by impact fees and other negotiated development fees or exactions. Who gets to pay that? The developer. And it says, in addition, Nibley does not intend to raise taxes in order to support future annexation. So clearly, the whole burden of any impact on this development is going to come out of the developer's pocket. Why do you think a developer would go to Logan City versus Nibley City? Pretty obvious. And as I indicated, the parcels have been in Logan City's annexation plan since 1996. Now let's get very specific about this. As I indicated, and Mr. Daines will indicate, when they were doing due diligence on the purchase of this property last fall, he went specifically to Nibley City and said, if we want to develop as a multifamily, do you have an ordinance on this? And the answer was no. We don't have an ordinance. They closed on this deal after that due diligence. And then what happens is, and they also could see that the service infrastructure was not adequate. And I'm not going to get into that. That's not my area of expertise. We've got engineers and the people who have done that investigation. We've got all of that information here so you can see the due diligence done by my client was detailed, specific, and that's what they purchased the property based on. No municipality may annex an unincorporated area located within a specific county unless the municipality has adopted an annexation policy plan as provided in this section showing how the services will be financed, an estimate of the tax consequences to residents both currently within the municipal boundaries and in the expansion area, and the interests of all affected entities, and to expand the infrastructure, services, and facilities into the area being considered for inclusion in the expansion area. And if you look at Nibley's own annexation plan, these two parcels have been a bone of contention in the sense that in 2018, when they adopted their plan, they had to put it out for notice, and Logan City specifically identified by parcel number these parcels and said, this is an overlap, guys. What are you doing this for? That happened in 2018. And they didn't do anything about it until after my clients purchased the property based on their due diligence, and then they come in and file a protest, and then on April 15th, they finally adopt a multifamily ordinance. But if you want to go into comparisons, if you look at the two ordinances, Logan City versus Nibley, and the exactions that will be taken out in terms of swimming pool, restrooms, parks, the kinds of density in terms of parking is instead of 1 to 10, it's 1 to 3. I'm just trying to help you understand why my client feels like they're the pawn in this bigger fight. And if Nibley really takes seriously the idea that private property rights are important, which they have in their own plan, why are they using my client to deal with a problem that's apparently been going on for many, many, many years? And you heard both sides of that. I won't get into it. So basically, that's where they're at. Mark?
Mark Daines. I'm going to address some of the issues that we faced with acquiring this piece of property from the property owner. perspective, and as Gary had alluded to, just to start at the very beginning of this, I'd been in discussions with this piece of property with Paul Campbell for years, right, Paul? It's been years. You know, he's had an overall plan of what to do with his property there and what he would like to see done. It would have been last October, Paul finally approached me and said, I'm ready to do something on this piece of property. And I said, okay, let's look what options are with this piece of property. November, I approached both cities, as Gary stated, did our due diligence to see first to see what, knowing that this property was still in the county, of what city's annexation plan it was in. It was actually in 3 city annexation plans with Logan, Nibley, and Millville. And when we go to look at a piece of property to annex it, we look and see, okay, what is their annexation plan? What is their proposed zoning for this piece of property to be annexed in? And what infrastructure is in place to support the piece of property? Millville was immediately eliminated because they don't have the infrastructure and the zoning for what Paul would want to see this piece of property go to give him the most benefit financially on the piece of property. So then it came down to Logan and Nibley. We looked at Logan had multi-family zone in place, had an infrastructure plan in place, went to Nibley. Nibley had a medium density zone in place for this to be annexed into. Sat down with Paul, said, Paul, here's the best direction to go with your property to get you the best benefit out of your piece of property that you can to utilize that. So made the decision after contacting Nibley to see what their options are going forward with something similar to what Logan has. Talked to their city planner, he says, we don't have anything in place. So the decision at that point was easy to approach Logan City for annexation. Began the process with Logan City on, filled out the application for annexation mid-December, I think it was December 15th, and began that process. It's a 90-day process to go through with all the notifications, followed the checklist for annexation, did everything that was required for us to be annexed in. And as we know, we are here now. So part of our concern is with this protest and trying to show that the reason that we didn't go to Nibley is because Nibley's not prepared for what this piece of property wanted, what we wanted to take this piece of property. A lot of that's been explained, went through all the annexation code. Probably one of our biggest things in our discussions, and we've had further and more discussions with Nibley because part of their petition or protest was to try to convince us still to come into Nibley. I've met multiple times with city council and the mayor and staff of Nibley City and had discussions of what their views are and what they wanted to see here. Couple of things to point out and what we're looking at is there's been a lot of confusion for us from where Nibley is really going or what they want to do. In the last meeting, the mayor in his presentation took the approach of that they wanted to buy the piece of property. Had mentioned in the meeting, the meeting notes and minutes reflect it, said that they were willing to offer to buy the property and even take up to a $2 million loss on the property to be able to bring it into their city by purchasing it themselves. If they had to sell it at a loss, they'd take up to a $2 million loss to sell it to another developer. In the same meeting, the mayor said that if they don't have this piece of property in their city, it would financially impact them to the point that they would need to unincorporate as a city and let Logan take over the city. So we have these huge confusions here from Nibley City of what the purpose of them wanting to file this protest and have this piece of property in their city. And our conclusion has been through meetings with the city, is it's coming down to what they want this piece of property for, obviously, is financial purposes, for the impact fees, for the property tax, and so we as a property owner have been confused by what the initial results and initial responses were to this. In looking at the infrastructure of Nibley City to take this into Nibley City with a MR20, we repeatedly asked to show us that your infrastructure would be adequate. We received a statement from their engineers at the time that they would have to do significant upgrades to the utilities to this piece of property to accommodate what it would require. The other thing that we were a little bit confused, well, not confused about, but got caught in the middle of, was Nibley City, during this process, decided to implement a new zoning ordinance for multifamily housing. At the time, in the discussions with Nibley, we were told that they would match Logan's ordinances exactly in order to get us to come to Nibley City. So they started the process, I don't know exactly when, but then passed their ordinance on April 15th. After our review of their ordinance, it doesn't match exactly what Logan's ordinance is. A couple of things that we've have brought out, and they're in this slide, some of the things that we want to just point out that we see are kind of, from a developer standpoint and a property owner standpoint, is they have the 20 units per acre. You know, we haven't really had time to dive in to look at their ordinance versus Logan's ordinance on a complete layout of the property. But just some of the things that have stood out to us, height requirements, Nibley's shows a 40-foot, Logan City shows 45-foot, maximum frontage, 175, Logan City, wasn't available on Nibley City's ordinance. So some of those things through here, open space, those type of things, from a developer we look at strongly of how we can maximize and utilize our property the best ability. One thing that stood out to us was parking requirements for units were exactly the same. And then one line item that came out was visitor parking, in that Logan has one parking space for 10 units in visitor parking, and Nibley has one space for 3 units, which is considerably larger parking lot we'd have to put in. So looking at, even if this ordinance had been in place at the time that we approached annexation, our approach would still be to go to Logan City. One other thing that we look at is impact fees. A couple of things that came out when we looked at this. Nibley City has a park impact fee of $4,500 per unit. Logan City Parks and Trails fee is $965. When we look at this, we know exactly what we're getting as a developer and a property owner from Logan City. We know how to plan, we know how to budget. We're really hesitant at looking at going into Nibley being a rushed ordinance, pass through. We don't know what we're dealing with as a property owner to the full extent, because there's very many unknowns with a brand new ordinance, especially one that was implemented in such a short time. Again, I'd just like to reiterate as a property owner that our decision to go to Logan was very entailed in our due diligence, and that's our desire. And hope that this commission will vote that a way that enables us to accomplish that. Thank you.
Thanks for your patience, everyone. I know this is exciting for all of us, so. All right, back to Nibley City's protest. We'll try to hit these points quick and move on. When you really look at their Nibley's protest points, they didn't have any real proof or feasibility studies or anything that really solidified their protest. It's really emotional elements that they focused on. You know, Nibley City's own plan says that it will finance these services through impact fees, and the burden is going to go directly to the developer or the property owner, as previously mentioned. And Nibley is claiming that there will be, impact fees on their parks, and is primarily focusing on a financial benefit in the form of a maintenance agreement from Logan City, and a lot of that it will come from property owners to accomplish this. So, in conclusion, I want to hit these points and make these very clear as a property owner's perspective. Regardless of what Nibley promises, the property owner chooses Logan for many obvious reasons, as previously mentioned. It is not the property owner's responsibility to solve Nibley City's financial problems. Nibley City cannot use a protest to take away owners' rights in an effort for Nibley's financial gain. It is the County Boundaries Commission's appointed duty to adhere to Utah Code. It is the property owner's choice, and our choice is Logan City. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any questions that you might have of
And
that presentation?
Bruce, did you have anything you want to say?
None? No, go ahead, Dion.
Question for Logan City. Mr. Hassel. Couple questions that I have is, apparently there's an island that's been created. I don't know exactly when that island was created. I don't know if it was the previous annexation or if it's one or two islands, one south of 2200 South and one north. My understanding from my experience on city council is when an island is created, the county has to give approval for that. Was that ever done in this process?
I'm not even sure what island they're referring to. I think that was during the 2007 annexation that he was referring to. I don't know. Is that correct, Mayor Dustin?
2020 annexation.
So I'm not sure if there was an island, it already existed, and so our annexation just reduced it. And generally the county's position, it's all island. Technically speaking, everything's an island if you go out large enough. And so if you're reducing the island, the county has always approved that. Where no island exists, so like if you're creating a donut hole or something like that, that's the type of island that they don't allow. So all of these have to go to the county council and they have to be approved. So even if this one, if Boundary Commission denies the protest, it still goes to the county council for final action. So.
Yeah. And I feel for Nibley with this, as far as their parks and things. As a member of Smithfield City Council, the county has approved subdivisions next to us that use our parks and our roads, and we didn't have a whole lot of say in that. However, one thing from that experience, it looks like the south end of this property is a Nibley City street, and from my understanding, again, in order for access to that street, Nibley City would have to give approval for the access to that street. I don't know if that is part of the...
That's a good point, and that's why the county has changed their policy to not allow annexations to go to one or the other side of the street. They always require the middle of the street, so whatever city that development's in, they handle the grant of accesses. That's been a problem historically, but This one goes to the middle of the street. So south side is Nibley's, north side would be Logan.
Okay,
And just your point on the parks, if it's helpful, that is a big issue. And we've got a map to show all of the parks that the city currently has within a mile radius and, you know, what our proposals are. So Mike does want to can show that if it's of interest. Again, I don't want to take any longer. So only if you want to see it, we're not going to force it upon you, so.
well, and again, as far as parks, with Smithfield, we have a golf course, we have a pickleball court, we have all the recreation center, we have people from Hiram to Preston coming to use those, so we understand that. My final question is, something that I read from the last meeting that I think Mayor Dustin brought up, is that not all property owners within the proper distance south of this annexation were given a notice for the annexation. Can you address that?
That's the first I'm hearing of it. I don't even recall that in the last meeting. Mike?
There was a map, I wasn't here for the last meeting, but there was a map showing that, I think it's 300 feet, the north end of that one subdivision did not receive notices on the annexation. I don't know if that was...
That wasn't part of the city's presentation.
Yeah, there might have been a public comment that said that, but yeah, I'm not aware of it. It wasn't part of the protest, you know.
There was someone that stepped up and mentioned something, but I can't remember who it was, but.
I often get a chuckle because we have this happen all the time at City Council in Logan. People get up and complain I didn't get notice, but they're at the meeting speaking on that issue. So they may not have got the mail notice, but they clearly got notice because they were here to speak.
Yeah, that's my only concern, was the ordinance met as far as notification of neighboring property owners?
No, like any city, we're not infallible, but I think we do a pretty good job going down the checklist. We try to follow all of the, we do follow all the regulations. If we missed a notice, it was just never brought to our attention. And I don't even remember the public comment, but it certainly wasn't, they didn't challenge the noticing, and we didn't get any, again, a formal protest on that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of any of the litigants and anybody out there? Anybody got any questions of anybody that we close it and let's have our discussion.
We're gonna hear from the county attorney.
Well, we'll be
correct?
asking him questions, I'm sure. Okay, well then we'll open it up for discussion amongst the commission here. And those are the kind of questions we can bombard you, or we can share whatever thoughts that we have on this.
I think it may be helpful if you have me go first, and then
Yeah,
I
go
might
ahead.
be able to just answer a bunch of questions that would have been asked. Ooh. Janine, can we put a...
By the way, this is an expensive hearing. At $300 an hour for 1, 2, 3, 4, how many lawyers? Well, you two are already on a payroll somewhere. You were only at, $50 an hour for, I don't know.
I've got attorney overload. I saw Demler at lunch.
Oh. They say lawyers' fees are like basically impact fees, just on a per hour basis. Go ahead, John.
The question that I was asked last time is, what do you base your decision on? What can you base your decision on? And I've done some, I've tried to be thorough in doing some research on that. And the Utah Supreme Court has said, quote, "The Boundary Commission functions as both a legislative body and an adjudicative body." And now I'm going to tell you when you're doing which, I believe. As you look at this subsection 8, this says what you're to do when you consider protests. In considering protests, the commission shall consider whether the proposed annexation A, complies with the requirements of section 10.2.402 and 10.2.403 and the annexation policy plan of the proposed annexing municipality. The Supreme Court has said that when when the Boundary Commission is required to apply the rules promulgated by the legislature regarding annexation to particular factual circumstances, then you're performing a judicial function. I think under subsection A here, when you're checking to see did the proper notice go out, those sorts of things, and checking the facts against the rules, you're acting as judges. Did they meet the check boxes? Then you come to subsection B, and the code says that you're also to consider whether the proposed annexation conflicts with the annexation policy plan of another municipality. When those maps are overlapping, then that throws to you this consideration. If we were a county of the first class, there would be a feasibility study, and you consider lots of different factors. The legislature recently changed that to where only counties of the first class do feasibility studies. But those same sorts of considerations become yours. And the Supreme Court has said in the context of feasibility studies, before the law changed there, that there would be a hearing, and at the hearing, the feasibility consultant presents the results of the study. The Boundary Commission takes public comment. As such, the Boundary Commission considers whether a proposed annexation is good policy. In this sense, the Boundary Commission acts in a legislative capacity. So once you get to this subsection B, you're now acting as a legislative body. What do you get to consider as a legislative body? Pretty much anything that's put before you, the same way as when the county council meets or the Utah legislature meets, you're making policy, and the courts have said that we won't overturn your decision if your decision, quote, could promote the general welfare, or even if it is reasonably debatable that it is in the interest of the general welfare. That your decision cannot be attacked unless there is no reasonable basis for it. So if you believe that the check boxes have been met, and I'm going to tell you, I think they have been from what I've heard, then you're now in the legislative realm, and as long as your decision is arguably reasonable, you're okay. Now, both cities have talked about each other's annexation policy plans, and if you look up there, that's subsection A. There's not been a case on it. I've not heard this argument from either city until today, but I am quite confident that a court would say that in terms of can we check the box, that's talking about the map part of the plan, and that both cities have aspirational statements in their plans. I don't think that the court would say that that's a checkbox on the aspirational statements. Now, could you consider whether one city or another is meeting their aspirational statements in their plan as part of your legislative function? Yes, but I don't think that's a checkbox. As I make my comments here, I want to be clear that I am not weighing in on either side of that legislative decision. That is yours, and I don't want to give any impression that I'm weighing in on either side. But I do want to be sure that that it's clarified for you that under the Utah Code, a property owner does not have a right to annexation, not a codified right. The property owner can make a request, and their desire certainly can weigh into your legislative, consider the policies, and that people have property rights and all of that. But the Supreme Court has made clear that it's still a legislative decision. Property owners don't get to choose where they go.
Can I back you up on this statement you were
Yep.
saying about the general welfare? Could you refresh? Yeah, I didn't quite get that all written
Yes.
down, and so I just want to know the gist of.
I'm sorry, I don't have that to put on the screen for you, but your decision would be upheld by a court if it, and this is the quote, if it could promote the general welfare, or even if it is reasonably debatable that it is in the interest of the general welfare. your decision can't be arbitrary. I like the sound of Nibley better than I like the sound of Logan. That's always had a better ring to me. That would be arbitrary, that would be capricious. But as long as you can articulate a reasonable reason, even if others could disagree with it, your decision would be upheld. I don't think that anyone has argued that in this instance, the Peninsula Island issue is one that would hold this up. Am I wrong on that, you folks?
With this annexation, a new peninsula is created. Not peninsula, sorry, an island.
So, and this is a point that the county could take up with Logan if this annexation moves forward, that it does talk, the code does talk about that annexation can't leave or create an unincorporated island. And I know our planning department has read that kind of broadly, that if you've got a big island that becomes a little island, that is leaving an island, and the county really ought to be consulted and get to give approval. That approval could still be given, that approval could still be denied, and I'd need to look at the map a little better to know that, but I don't think that needs to hold your decision one way or the other. And I'm happy to answer more questions as you go, but I think that gives you a roadmap of where I think your discretion is.
Thank you very much. Okay, it is now for discussion. What questions we'd have of each other, share your opinions, and do so freely.
Nobody's gonna
No
jump?
one's quick to, no opinions?
I do.
Okay.
I'll jump.
Mayor Buse, go ahead.
And you answered the majority of my questions. I'll have one final. I do have a unique view of it, as would be different from others. I am the mayor of a small community, so listening to both, there was a lot of things I'm going, we just did general plan, I get that. I don't get that. And then I'm hearing this side and I'm going, I get that, I don't. So I see plenty of that. So from a personal standpoint, I've got plenty of opinions. From a mayor's standpoint, I have plenty of opinions, but those I table because in this position, I think we have a few things to look at, and that's it. And my questions to you, and I believe you've answered them, is the property in Logan's annexation area? Yes. What's the owner's desire? Were the filings proper? And is there anything that you see out of line? Those are the boxes that you talked about checking. Is there anything that occurred going through there that from the county standpoint that, well, that's questionable and could be?
I'll say not from the county's standpoint.
And that's what I need to hear.
Well, what I'm going to say is not an opinion of the county.
Correct.
But I've been asked to advise you. As an attorney advising you.
That's what I'm asking.
I think that those checkbox items where you're acting as judges, did they meet the basic requirements? No, I think that everyone's spying on that. Now, that being said, the argument that was made by both sides, really, as I heard it, is, but they say in their plan that they're going to do this, and they didn't do that, and so they don't meet the box. Again, I think that a court would say that are you meeting your plan is the map.
And that's why I ask you, because as I listen, of course, you've got two opposing sides, so you're going to have two differing opinions. And that's where we have to sift that out and get to the final facts of what is important in this situation, and you've answered that for me.
And I should say, I can't say that with 100% certainty. We need a court case on that, because it is in their plans, the language that each side has cited. And so if you say, well, they aren't complying with the language in their plan, then maybe that is enough to kick them out. I have a hard time seeing a court going that way.
And that is difficult, as having just gone through a general plan. Again, a plan is a plan passed by ordinance, but it is a plan subject to change.
Now, that being
It
said,
is.
all of those same considerations, though, while they aren't a checkbox,
Correct.
they are legitimate points for you to weigh.
Understand.
And
Understand.
does that fit in the general welfare criteria that you?
Yes.
That's,
Thank you. Other comments, suggestions?
I'll speak if nobody
You
else
bet,
wants to.
Kathleen.
I sat down this morning, I rewatched the whole meeting from last time. Even played back some of it. I wanted to understand it all. I studied the maps that were provided the last time. And I think one of the biggest concerns that Nibley has is the impact it will have on their city, on their parks. Those were the things we heard in that meeting last time. As I studied the maps, my personal opinion is that will it impact Nibley City? Yes, it will. But I believe the greater impact of any development there, whether it be in Nibley City or in Logan City, is to Logan City. And the reason why I believe that is because of the flow of traffic to and from jobs. Most of that traffic is most of the jobs are in Logan. Some might go to the meatpacking plant in Hiram. Undoubtedly, they'll drive through Nibley City. But the most of it's gonna funnel right to 89 and head into Logan or head wherever they're gonna go. The most of that impact is gonna hit Logan more than it's gonna hit Nibley as far as traffic flow, if I were looking at traffic flow. Also, as was testified today, the project has parks, swimming pools, facilities within it. That doesn't mean everybody's going to stay right there and go to that park. They'll go to other parks. But just as Dion mentioned, lots of parks and facilities are used by a lot of people from one end of the valley to the other end of the valley. So my personal opinion is that they have met the requirement. I don't see anything that would change my mind as to say that I would deny it. I believe in property owners' rights. I think they did their due diligence. And I would still vote in favor of an annexation.
Thank you. Others?
the only thing that I would add on that and agree wholeheartedly there is whatever decision is made, I hope there's still some open dialogue between both sides. And especially with a situation like this, I believe it gets harder now than it was before, but I sure hope that there is. Because there is going to be impact both ways on either decision. I really hope that there's dialogue, and good dialogue.
Okay. Any other inputs, ideas, thoughts, opinions? I know a plan, and this is always the heartburn that I have in general plans, is that they cost a boatload of money. And they're subject to change. And the change often is economically driven. You just don't know what happens economically in one part of a city or another part of a city or wherever it may be. You try to direct that, but just like right now, it can turn a county, it can turn a city into a frenzy with what's going on right now with the huge demand of where people are wanting or needing to live. And that's the other thing that that's really tough is I do worry a little bit about affordable housing, and I think it's always tough to put affordable housing, whether that be the multifamily areas, the apartments. I worry about them going to the outer fringes of a city rather than bring them into the center of a city, because then the burdens of a lot of that affordable housing then becomes on the other entities and cities around you. Does that make sense? Because I think that's very real. But then you can also check up that you have affordable housing and get your federal grants, and things like that. And then the burden isn't as impactful on you. But yet, I think it's really it's really good that some of the cities ought to push a lot of that to the center to revive a lot of their center, their city dwellings. But we're not here to even look at those things. But I worry a little bit about this. I've heard quite a bit of this, a lot of these things in relationships with Nibley, Logan, and things have come into a head over several years of, tick for tack, and you get that, and why'd you do this, and back and forth, and maybe a lot of lack of communication, or a lack of, well, this is what we want, but then all of a sudden you change an administration, and now this is what we want. And that changes. That changes again with elections. We just had an election nationally, things have changed. But setting all that aside, I also still agree that legally, that Logan has gone through the process. And I'm also a proponent that if the property owner has sought out and also seen what is in their best interest and looked at both entities and went to those, and yes, they do not always get what they want, but yet I think that does have an impact as to what they do with their property, a large impact. So I still have not changed my mind as to whether to vote against Logan's annexation process. So, any other items? If not, we would also attend any kind of motion that we could even make that decision accordingly.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
The planning, or what are we called here?
Boundary Commission.
This Boundary Commission will need to issue a written decision, and that decision, while it only needs to be based on some reasonable basis, somebody's going to need to draft it, and you may point to me to help with that, and then you'd approve it, of course. Without comments from folks, if a vote happens one way or the other, it would be nice to know what the reasonable basis are, and we've heard that from some, but we just want to make sure that anyone who'd like to say what the reasonable basis for their vote is, that would be helpful.
Thank you. So,
I probably should. I had plenty of comments, but didn't say which way I was going. I would vote to approve the annexation based on what I had discussed. That leaves 5 of you.
Leaves 3 of us. 3. I guess I'm still a little torn by the annexation deal of both cities. Everything else lines up, but as we look at that, and I know that there's been dates and what have you given, but this is really hard for me because it's just kind of flying by the deal that we're doing. As far as saying the impact of traffic, I don't think we have any idea of that because there's schools, churches going the other way. To me, that's not a decider, but I do agree that with property rights, I feel that the property owner should have say in which direction they go, and ultimately, at the end, it turns out to be which is the best financially for them. Still their choice. I don't know that we were originally told that there could be a provision. I guess I would be 100% fine with this if there was any provision at all as far as whatever impact fees, and I don't know how we could even do this, but if there was any way that could be, a portion of that designated for that area only to help that area, maybe make me feel a little better, but that's my thoughts.
John, I'll just say this. First of all, I don't get it. There has to be a verbal vote before the vote. That doesn't make sense to me.
No, but there will need to be, somebody's going to need to put in writing.
But that's not, but that doesn't have to come before the decision. I don't think that's part of the obligation that we have to decide what we're going to vote for before we vote.
That's true. You don't have to say it all.
It seems
before you
almost
vote.
manipulative, you know, but nonetheless, I think, I came here open, I came here willing to listen, and I do think the opposing argument, I don't believe meets, the criteria for a denial of it. If that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, and not everybody has to speak and all of that, but there'll need to be some indication by the end of why.
I hate to interject, but John, can't they just make that in their motion and state what their findings are?
They can.
People,
Yep.
Right.
how they
Yeah,
vote.
I didn't mean to interrupt the
That's how I
process to
understand
that
it.
extent, just.
But anyway, there it is.
I'll make a motion. You ready for a motion?
You bet.
I'll make a motion to approve the annexation request that's before us of the property. I don't know if you want me to state parcel numbers and so on and so forth, but
We have that.
this annexation request, I make a motion to approve it.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded that we approve this annexation that's before us. Is there any discussion? Are there any amendments that want to be attached to it as to why we didn't just put those together after?
No amendments.
Okay, any others? Hearing no discussion, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? It is unanimous. Okay, it has been approved. As far as getting together on those details, you've heard enough, or we can put that together and to
help
take,
you get a draft.
this here now goes to county council for final approval, I believe. No? I thought it does.
No, it's just on you.
Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate, serious, your civility, I mean, openness, and this is why we do this, is because it's a, I mean, this, not too many countries do it like this, and they're in a sad situation, so we do appreciate everybody in this process. Thank you very much.
Get to bring it to a soccer game by
We'll
noon
now
by
adjourn.
5.
Come out to my place and move pipe if you
Can
want.
he make it? He's gonna have